No, don't pull away. The rancher froze in surprise, and then acted the evening sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, the kind of colors that made the wide-open fields of the ranch look almost magical. Jackson, a tall man with broad shoulders and the kind of quiet strength that came from years of working the land, walked slowly along the fence line. His boots crunched softly over the dry dirt, and the faint smell of hay and horses hung in the air. He had been on the ranch all day, moving from one task to another, mending fences, checking the water troughs, feeding the horses, and making sure the cattle were all safe and accounted for. Life on the ranch was hard, but it was the only life Jackson had ever really known. As the sun dipped lower, Jackson's eyes scanned the fields one last time before heading back to the barn. That's when he heard it, a sound out of place. A soft thump followed by a distressed whinny from one of the horses. He paused, frowning. Horses rarely made that kind of noise unless they were frightened or hurt. Without a second thought, he started toward the barn, moving faster than usual. Something told him that whatever it was, it needed immediate attention. When Jackson reached the barn, he saw her. A young woman, probably in her early 20s, was struggling with a large horse that seemed to be spooked. Her hair was messy, tangled in small twigs, and her hands were scratched from trying to calm the animal. Her clothes were dusty and torn at the edges, evidence of a struggle through the rough fields. Jackson's heart went out to her immediately. He could tell she was scared, but she was also determined, not someone who gave up easily. "Hey." "Let me help you," Jackson called out, his voice steady but gentle. The woman turned toward him, eyes wide and searching. There was relief there, but also hesitation. She nodded quickly, almost as if she had been waiting for someone strong to step in. Jackson moved closer, keeping his hands calm and visible so he wouldn't startle the horse. He knew the animals well enough to read their moods, and this one was tense but not dangerous if approached correctly. He reached out slowly, placing one hand on the horse's neck and the other on the woman's arm to guide her movements. The horse shifted beneath their touch, and for a moment, Jackson felt a jolt of surprise when their hands brushed. She didn't pull away. Instead, she whispered softly, almost shyly, "No, don't pull away." Jackson froze. He had not expected those words. The phrase lingered in the quiet barn, almost like it hung in the air between them. It was not just about the horse. He could feel it in her voice. She was asking for more than physical support. She was asking for understanding, for patience, for someone to be steady when everything around her felt uncertain. He could see the trust in her eyes, tentative but genuine, and he knew that how he reacted next could either reassure her or push her away. He chose to stay. He kept his hand firm on the horse, his other hand supporting hers, but he made no sudden movements. The world outside seemed to quiet itself. The only sounds were the soft breathing of the horse, the distant chirping of birds settling for the night, and the gentle rustle of the wind through the hay in the barn. Jackson's mind worked quickly, thinking about the best way to calm both the animal and the woman. He could feel her tension easing slowly, her body relaxing against his steady presence. For a while, they simply stood there, holding the horse together. Jackson noticed small things, the way her hands trembled slightly, the way she glanced at the horse with cautious hope, and the way she trusted him enough to let go of fear, if only a little. It was a quiet, delicate moment, but it was powerful. He realized then that sometimes help wasn't about words. Sometimes it was about showing up, staying calm, and letting someone feel safe. After a few minutes, the horse's breathing began to slow, and it no longer pulled nervously against them. Jackson gently guided the animal back into the stall, his hands never leaving hers until the horse was fully settled. Only then did he step back, giving her space but staying close enough to offer reassurance. She looked up at him, her eyes soft now, filled with relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she said quietly, almost shyly. Her voice had a calmness now that had been missing before. I don't know what I would have done without you." Jackson shrugged modestly, not wanting to make a big deal of it. "It's nothing," he said, though he knew it was more than nothing. Moments like these didn't happen every day, and he could feel the weight of connection, small, subtle, and real. He didn't say it aloud, but he thought to himself that sometimes life put people together at just the right moment. For the next hour, he helped her check the horse for scratches and minor injuries. They worked quietly, speaking only when necessary, but each word built a bridge between them. She seemed to relax more with every passing minute, and he found himself opening up slightly too, explaining how he cared for the animals, how he managed the ranch, and little tips for handling frightened horses. It was practical advice, but it carried warmth and care, which she noticed. By the time the sky had turned a deep shade of purple and the first stars appeared, Jackson felt a strange sense of satisfaction. The woman, who had seemed so fragile at first, now moved with a steadier confidence, guided by his steady hands and calm presence. He realized that this encounter, unexpected and surprising, had already left an impact on both of them. As they walked out of the barn together, the evening air cool against their faces, Jackson felt that something had changed. He wasn't sure what it was yet, but he could sense that this woman's presence, even for a short while, had brought something new into his routine life. And he knew, without fully understanding why, that he would not pull away, not from the horse, not from her, and not from this moment that had quietly shifted something inside him. For Jackson, the ranch had always been a place of work, solitude, and routine. But tonight it became a place of connection, trust, and subtle revelation. And though he didn't know what the future held, he understood that some moments, especially the ones that freeze you in surprise, were meant to be met with patience, care, and action. The next morning the ranch was quiet, bathed in soft golden light as the sun rose over the distant hills. Jackson had been up early, as usual, checking on the cattle and making sure the fences held strong after the small storm the previous night. The work was routine, but it gave him time to think. And ever since the evening before, his thoughts kept returning to the young woman, Clara, and the moment in the barn when she had whispered, "Don't pull away." Those words had stayed with him, simple yet heavy with meaning. By mid-morning, Clara returned. She said she wanted to check on the horses again, and Jackson noticed immediately that there was a quiet determination in her step. She was still cautious, but there was less fear than before. Her hair was neater, though still touched with a few stray strands from the field, and her clothes were worn but clean. Jackson greeted her with a nod and a small smile, feeling a strange mix of anticipation and calm. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm. "Ready for another lesson in horse handling?" Clara smiled, a small, shy curve of her lips. "I think so," she replied. There was a quiet confidence in her tone, though the faint tension in her shoulders revealed that she still had some fear. Jackson understood that this trust had to be earned gradually, like breaking in a stubborn horse. Patience, consistency, and care were the keys. They spent the morning moving from one horse to another. Jackson guided her hand to the correct spots on each animal, teaching her how to approach them without startling their senses. He demonstrated calming techniques, how to talk gently to a frightened horse, and the importance of staying steady. Clara listened intently, absorbing every word, and he noticed the small ways she adapted what he taught her. Her hands no longer shook as much, her movements were steadier, and her voice, when speaking to the horses, was softer but firmer. Jackson was struck by her dedication. Most people would have given up after one difficult experience, but Clara returned the next day and the next, each time showing more courage. He admired her persistence and resilience. In return, he found himself more open than usual, sharing not just technical advice but little stories about the ranch. How he had learned to read a horse's mood, what mistakes he had made when he first started, and small moments that had taught him patience and understanding. By midday, they had moved the horses to a smaller paddock for exercise. Clara seemed nervous at first, but with Jackson guiding her, she led the horse confidently around the enclosure. When the horse stumbled slightly, she faltered, but Jackson was right there, steadying her. Their hands brushed again, and she gave him a small smile, one that spoke of trust and reassurance. "See," he said gently, "you've got this. The horse trusts you, and now I do too." Clara laughed softly, a sound that blended with the rustling wind through the trees. "I'm learning from the best," she said, though her eyes betrayed a hint of humility. She clearly respected his skill, but Jackson also sensed that she was beginning to see him not just as a teacher, but as a steady presence she could rely on. After a while, they paused under the shade of a large oak tree. Jackson handed her a canteen of water, and they drank in silence for a moment. There was a comfort in that silence, a sense that words were not always necessary to communicate trust. Clara leaned back slightly, closing her eyes as if savoring the calm. Jackson observed her quietly, noticing the way her breathing had evened out, how her shoulders relaxed, and how the tension in her expression softened. "You're doing better than you think," Jackson said softly, breaking the silence. Clara opened her eyes and met his gaze. "I still feel nervous," she admitted, But I don't know. It feels easier with you here. I guess I trust you. Jackson felt a small warmth in his chest. Trust was a fragile thing, and earning it took patience. Her words were simple, but they carried weight. She was not asking for protection in a weak way. She was acknowledging that she had confidence in his steady presence. That was a moment of connection he would remember for a long time. They continued their work, moving the horses back to their stalls. Jackson guided Clara carefully, making sure each movement was safe. When a horse got startled by a sudden noise, a crow flying overhead, she froze instinctively. Jackson was immediately beside her, steadying her and the horse simultaneously. "It's all right," he said gently. "I've got you, just take it slow." Her hands, which had trembled at the beginning, were now firm in his grip. She followed his lead, her steps measured and confident. By the time they had calmed the horse, Clara was breathing steadily, and her eyes were brighter, more assured. Jackson smiled inwardly. Small victories like these were as meaningful as any grand accomplishment on the ranch. Over the next few days, their routine continued, but with subtle changes. Clara became more confident, not only in handling the horses, but in speaking with Jackson. They shared small stories about their lives, their experiences, and even little quirks and routines. Jackson learned that Clara had grown up in the countryside, but had faced challenges that had made her cautious around strangers. She had a quiet strength, tempered by her careful nature, and Jackson found himself admiring her resilience. He, in turn, shared moments from his life on the ranch. He spoke of the early mornings, the long hours, the unexpected storms, and the satisfaction of seeing the land thrive through hard work. Clara listened attentively, her eyes reflecting curiosity and appreciation. In those moments, Jackson realized that connection was not built through grand gestures, but through consistency, patience, and genuine attention to another person's presence. One afternoon, as they were leading a horse to the paddock, a sudden gust of wind swept across the open fields. The horse shied again, and Clara instinctively pulled back. Jackson was immediately at her side, steadying both her and the horse. He noticed a flicker of surprise in her eyes, followed by a small, grateful smile. "You didn't pull away," she whispered. Jackson smiled, recognizing the echo of her words from that first evening in the barn. "I'm not going anywhere," he replied simply. "I'm right here." That simple statement carried more weight than either of them realized. It was a promise of steadiness, a reassurance that some moments required presence more than words. Clara's posture relaxed, and the horse, sensing the calm energy between them, settled once more. As the sun began to set, painting the ranch in golden hues, Jackson and Clara stood together by the paddock fence, watching the animals graze peacefully. There was a quiet sense of satisfaction, a feeling that they had accomplished something together, not just in managing the horses, but in building trust. The bond between them had grown subtly yet powerfully, rooted in small acts of care, patience, and understanding. Clara turned to Jackson, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and newfound confidence. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not just helping me but for letting me learn. I feel stronger now." Jackson nodded, feeling a quiet pride. "You were strong all along," he said. "I just helped you see it." They walked back toward the barn together, their steps in rhythm, sharing small laughs and light conversation. The evening air was cool, and the first stars began to appear, twinkling above the vast fields. For Jackson, the ranch had always been a place of work and solitude, but now it felt alive with connection, hope, and shared understanding. That night, as he sat on the porch watching the moon rise over the hills, Jackson reflected on the past few days. Clara's presence had brought a new perspective, a reminder that trust and connection were built through consistent action, small kindnesses, and steadfast support. He knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them with patience and understanding, and that some moments, like the ones they had shared, would remain in memory as quiet, yet profound milestones in both of their lives. The following days at the ranch were warm and calm, with the sun rising early and painting the fields in soft gold. Jackson had grown used to the rhythm of the ranch, the calls of the cattle, the gentle rustle of the wind through the trees, and the quiet murmur of the horses in their stalls. But now the rhythm had changed slightly, shaped by Clara's presence. She arrived regularly, helping with the horses, feeding the animals, and learning about life on the ranch. Jackson noticed subtle changes in her every day. The first time she had stepped onto the ranch, her movements were hesitant, cautious, and full of nervous energy. Now she walked with purpose, her steps sure and deliberate. She had learned the routines of the ranch, how to anticipate the horse's moods, and how to manage the smallest challenges that came with caring for the animals. Her confidence had grown, but it was paired with thoughtfulness and patience, qualities Jackson deeply respected. Their days were spent in quiet companionship, a shared rhythm of work and small conversation. Jackson had a natural way of explaining things simply, with clarity and calmness, and Clara absorbed everything he taught. She asked questions, listened intently, and sometimes surprised him with her insight. For instance, one afternoon while they were moving hay to the barn, she suggested a new way to stack it so the horses could reach it more easily. Jackson paused, impressed. "That's a good idea," he said, genuinely appreciative. "You're learning fast." Clara smiled, a faint blush rising to her cheeks. "I'm just trying to help," she said. Her tone was modest, but Jackson saw the spark of pride in her eyes. He realized that their connection was no longer just about learning horse care, it was about mutual respect. Each saw the other's strengths and learned from them. One afternoon, Jackson decided to take Clara on a longer ride through the fields. The sky was bright and clear, with the soft scent of wildflowers carried by the breeze. He led her horse while guiding hers alongside, explaining the terrain and the best paths to avoid uneven ground. Clara listened attentively, her posture upright and steady. Jackson admired her concentration and courage. Handling a horse across open land required trust, not only in the animal but in each other. At a quiet spot near a small creek, they dismounted and let the horses graze. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and the sound of it flowing over rocks created a peaceful backdrop. Clara knelt by the creek, cupping her hands to drink some water, and Jackson watched her quietly. There was a calmness to her now, a serenity that had not been there before. It was a quiet kind of beauty, natural and unassuming. They sat on a fallen log nearby, their legs dangling over the edge, watching the horses explore the creek's edge. Jackson began to share more about his life, how he had grown up on the ranch, what lessons he had learned from hard work, and the times he had struggled and failed. Clara listened with genuine interest, her eyes reflecting empathy and understanding. She shared bits of her own story too, her challenges, the lessons she had learned, and how she had come to value patience and persistence. Their conversations were not rushed or forced. They flowed naturally, like a gentle stream. They laughed softly at small anecdotes, nodded at shared experiences, and occasionally fell silent, simply enjoying the calm of the open fields. Jackson realized that these moments of quiet understanding were just as important as any lesson about handling horses. They were learning about each other, building trust and mutual respect. As the days passed, their bond deepened. They worked together to mend fences, feed the cattle, and care for the horses, but it was not just about the work, it was about being present for each other. Clara began to anticipate Jackson's instructions, understanding his methods without needing constant guidance. Jackson, in turn, noticed her growing confidence and resilience. He admired the way she handled challenges, how she faced her fears without complaint, and how she approached tasks with thoughtful care. One morning, Jackson brought out a younger, more skittish horse that had been difficult to handle. Clara hesitated at first, feeling a flicker of the nervousness she had when they first met. Jackson noticed immediately and stepped beside her. "Take your time," he said gently. "Remember what we practiced. You've got this." Clara nodded, taking a deep breath. She approached the horse slowly, her movements deliberate and steady. Jackson guided her hands as she stroked the animal's neck and whispered softly, using the calm voice he had taught her. The horse initially pulled back slightly, but Clara remained patient, her confidence growing with each gentle touch. Jackson watched quietly, impressed by her determination and steady presence. After several minutes, the horse relaxed completely, nuzzling her hand. Clara's face lit up with a soft smile. "I did it," she whispered, almost to herself. Jackson gave a quiet nod of approval. "You did. You've come a long way in a short time." That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Jackson and Clara walked slowly back toward the barn. The air was warm and fragrant, carrying the subtle scent of hay and wildflowers. Clara looked around the ranch with a newfound appreciation, noticing details she had overlooked before. The way the sunlight caught the tops of the fences, the gentle sway of the trees, and the quiet rhythm of the animals returning to their stalls. They paused near the barn doors, watching the horses settle for the night. Clara turned to Jackson, her eyes soft. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Not just for teaching me, but for being here, for trusting me and letting me learn at my own pace." Jackson felt a warmth in his chest. Trust, he realized, was a two-way street. She had trusted him when they first met, and now he trusted her to handle the animals, to navigate the challenges of the ranch, and to share these quiet, meaningful moments. "You've earned it," he said simply. "You've worked hard, and I respect that." Their days continued with the same rhythm. Jackson would guide Clara through the chores, offering advice and gentle encouragement while she learned, practiced, and improved. But over time, the work became secondary to the bond they were building. They shared stories, small laughs, and quiet silences that spoke volumes. Jackson noticed how Clara had grown, not just in skill, but in confidence, patience, and resilience. One evening, as they were bringing in the last of the horses, a sudden gust of wind blew through the barnyard, startling one of the animals. Clara froze instinctively, but Jackson was immediately at her side. He placed a steady hand on her shoulder and guided her through the movements they had practiced so many times before. Together, they calmed the horse, both of them moving in unison, speaking softly and remaining calm. When the horse finally settled, Clara exhaled deeply, relief washing over her. She looked at Jackson, a faint smile of gratitude and understanding on her face. "You didn't pull away," she whispered, echoing the words from that first evening in the barn. Jackson smiled, recognizing the weight of those words. "I never will," he replied simply. "I'm right here." In that moment, both of them understood something unspoken. Their connection was not just about learning, teaching, or trust with the horses. It was about presence, understanding, and steady support. They had grown together in a quiet, meaningful way, discovering a bond built on respect, patience, and care. As the stars appeared in the night sky and the ranch settled into its usual quiet, Jackson reflected on how far Clara had come. She had faced her fears, embraced new challenges, and grown stronger, not just in skill but in spirit. And he had learned something too. Sometimes, being there for someone, acting with calmness and consistency, was more powerful than words or grand gestures. The ranch, once a place of routine and solitude, now felt alive with shared experience. Every fence mended, every horse calmed, and every quiet conversation had strengthened the bond between them. They had discovered the value of presence, patience, and steady action. And they both knew that these moments, though quiet and ordinary on the surface, were extraordinary in the impact they left on their hearts. As they finally headed to the house for the evening, the air cool and still, Jackson glanced at Clara and saw the spark of confidence and trust in her eyes. And in his own heart, he felt a quiet satisfaction, a realization that some of the most meaningful moments in life came from small acts of care, steady presence, and shared understanding. The ranch was quiet that morning, the sun rising slowly over the hills and casting soft, golden light across the fields. Jackson moved through his usual routine, checking fences, making sure the cattle were safe, and tending to the horses. The rhythm of the ranch was comforting to him, steady and predictable, but he knew that today would be different. Clara had arrived early, her eyes bright with determination and a quiet excitement that he hadn't seen before. She greeted him with a smile. "Good morning," she said, adjusting her boots and brushing her hair back from her face. There was a lightness in her step, a confidence that had grown steadily over the past days. Jackson returned the greeting with a nod, feeling a small thrill of satisfaction at how far she had come. "Ready for the morning chores?" he asked. Clara nodded. "Yes, let's get started." They began their work with the horses, feeding them and checking their stalls. Jackson noticed how smoothly Clara moved around the animals now. She had learned to anticipate their moods, to calm them before they became frightened, and to act with patience and care. Each movement was precise, deliberate, and confident. Jackson watched her closely, a quiet pride swelling inside him. As the morning progressed, the sky darkened slightly with the approach of a sudden storm. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves and carrying the scent of rain. Jackson's instincts immediately kicked in. Storms could unsettle the horses and make them nervous. He glanced at Clara, noting the brief flicker of worry in her eyes. "It's okay," he said calmly. "We'll handle this together, just stay close." They moved quickly to secure the horses in their stalls. But one horse, younger and more skittish than the others, became agitated as the first drops of rain fell. It bolted forward, its hooves clattering against the barn floor. Clara froze instinctively, fear flashing across her face. Jackson didn't hesitate. He moved swiftly to her side, steadying her with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I've got you," he said firmly, guiding her movements as he calmed the horse. He spoke softly to both of them, his voice a steady anchor in the chaos. Clara followed his lead, her hands steadying on the horse's neck as she whispered soothing words. The horse gradually relaxed under their combined, calm presence. Jackson could feel the tension drain from Clara's body as she regained control, her confidence returning in real time. When the horse finally settled, she exhaled deeply, a mixture of relief and pride in her expression. "You did it," Jackson said softly. "See. I told you you're stronger than you think." Clara's eyes met his, gratitude and trust shining clearly. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. Jackson shook his head gently. "No, you did it yourself. I just helped you see it." The storm passed quickly, leaving behind a fresh, earthy scent and a gentle mist over the fields. Jackson and Clara stepped outside, taking a moment to breathe in the clean, rain-scented air. The horses were calm now, grazing peacefully in the paddocks, and the ranch had returned to its usual serene rhythm. As they walked back toward the barn, Jackson noticed how Clara carried herself now, with confidence, grace, and a quiet strength that had been absent when they first met. She looked at the ranch with a new appreciation, noticing details she had once overlooked. The gentle sway of the trees, the way the sunlight glimmered on wet grass, and the small, comforting noises of the animals returning to their stalls. "Jackson," she said softly, her voice thoughtful, "I never realized how much patience it takes to care for all of this. You make it look easy, but it's not." Jackson smiled. "It's not easy, but it's worth it, and now you see why. It's not just about the work, it's about being present, paying attention, and handling each challenge as it comes." Clara nodded, understanding in her eyes. She knew now what he meant. The ranch was a place of hard work, but it was also a place where trust, patience, and steady presence made all the difference. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Jackson and Clara decided to take a short ride through the fields to check on the cattle. The air was cool, the sky painted with streaks of pink and orange, and the ranch seemed peaceful in a way that felt almost magical. They rode side by side, guiding their horses carefully across the open fields, enjoying the quiet companionship and the shared sense of accomplishment that came from a day well spent. They paused near a small grove of trees, where the horses grazed on the soft grass. Jackson dismounted first, helping Clara down gently. "I think they're all settled now," he said. Clara looked around, a smile spreading across her face. "Everything seems calm. I think we handled the storm well." Jackson nodded, pleased with her observation. "You handled yourself well, Clara. You've come a long way." She turned to him, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and confidence. "I couldn't have done it without you. You never hesitated, not once." Jackson felt a warmth in his chest. That was the moment he understood something deeply. Being present, acting decisively, and showing patience could change not just the outcome of a situation, but the way someone felt about themselves. Clara's growth had been visible, and he had been honored to witness it. As they walked the horses back to the barn, Jackson and Clara shared quiet conversation. They spoke of the storm, the horses, and the small victories of the day. But beneath the words, there was a deeper understanding, a bond that had grown steadily over the past days through shared challenges, trust, and care. When they finally returned to the barn, the last light of the sun faded behind the hills. Jackson fed the horses and ensured they were secure for the night, while Clara helped with small tasks, her movements confident and efficient. Jackson watched her, realizing how much she had grown, not just in skill, but in courage and self-assurance. As they stepped outside the barn, the stars began to twinkle in the clear night sky. Clara paused, taking in the beauty of the ranch at night. "It's peaceful here," she said softly. "I didn't realize how much I would come to love this place." Jackson smiled, feeling a quiet satisfaction. "It has a way of teaching you patience, respect, and appreciation, and it teaches you to trust yourself, too." Clara turned to him, a gentle expression on her face. "Thank you for everything. For being patient with me, for teaching me, and for trusting me when I doubted myself." Jackson placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and reassuring. "You've earned it, Clara. You've worked hard and you've grown stronger. That's what matters." They stood together for a moment, looking out over the ranch. The moon rose high, casting a soft glow over the fields. The animals were calm, the air was still, and there was a quiet sense of accomplishment and connection. Jackson knew that this day, and the days they had shared, would remain in his memory forever. Clara broke the silence with a small laugh. "I never thought a ranch could feel like home in more ways than one." Jackson chuckled softly. "Sometimes it's not just the place that feels like home, it's the people you share it with." As they walked back toward the house, side by side, Jackson reflected on everything that had happened. He remembered the night they first met when Clara had whispered, "Don't pull away." At the time, it had surprised him, but now he understood the meaning fully. Trust, patience, and steady action had created something real, a connection that was quiet but powerful, simple but lasting. The ranch had taught them both lessons that extended beyond chores and horses. It had shown them the value of presence, care, and mutual respect. It had revealed courage in the face of fear, growth through consistent effort, and the deep satisfaction of sharing meaningful moments with someone who appreciates and respects you. As the night settled in, Jackson and Clara stood on the porch, watching the stars shimmer over the ranch. The wind was gentle, the air crisp, and the silence comforting. They didn't need many words. The bond between them spoke louder than anything said aloud. And in that quiet, peaceful moment, both of them knew that their lives had been quietly transformed, by trust, by patience, and by simply being there for one another when it mattered most.